and they really fucking matter. There's like 4 things that matter, and they really fucking matter. I mean, objectively, I mean, you should care, especially you, if you thought about it for 5 fucking minutes.
Welcome to episode 35 of the Out of Voices podcast. As always, we are your hosts, Keem and Esmè.
Hey, y'all.
Esmè, how are you doing today?
Funny. Very tired. This whole week has been draining for many reasons, some of which are work-related and some of which are not.
I am having very similar issues. And then I made the mistake of trying to add a social life onto this. So, yeah.
How's that working out for you?
It's fun, but I'm a little dead. Well,
it's nice that you were able to revive yourself enough to do this podcast today.
That's true. Yeah, this podcast is going to be something.
Probably a little short.
It's probably going to be a little short. I know for me it's going to be a mix of anger, but anger pushing through tiredness.
Yeah.
So we shall see. We shall see.
Yeah, same.
So guess that runs us into the news segment. And
are we doing a news segment, or are we just doing the one segment?
Oh. Well, I mean, my news story kind of ties into the one segment.
Okay, I didn't even bother.
So,
I didn't even bother to pick a news segment. I haven't been paying attention to the news.
I can do my one story and.
Okay.
All right. So yes, Esmè doesn't have a story for us today, but I do. It's going to be a rather short show and short story,
yes.
But it kind of ties into our topic segment for the week, which we'll get to in a moment. But a recently leaked report from the FBI Terror Unit says they're about to classify Black identity extremists as a terrorist threat.
What, like Black Lives Matter?
Oh yeah. Oh, here's the thing. Not even just Black Lives Matter. Basically, anyone who basically pro-blackness in a nutshell.
Oh, congratulations, Keem. How does it feel to be a terrorist?
Oh yeah, I guess I'm about to be officially on the domestic terrorist list, along with every other self-loving Black person in the country at this point.
I feel like I will also be put on this list.
Oh yeah, no, a lot of people about to be put on this list.
Unless they just decide to classify me as mentally ill.
Oh yeah.
Okay, but I'll get to that later.
We'll get to that. But so this report that got leaked, it's not out yet, but it was leaked, and the report is dated 2017, August 2017. The report said the FBI assesses it is very likely Black identity extremists, BIE. By the way, that's a new term they've coined. Black identity extremists, the BIE. Perceptions of police brutality against African Americans spurred an increase in premeditated retaliatory lethal violence against law enforcement and will very likely serve as justification for such violence. Incidents of alleged police abuse, they put quotations around this, have continued to feed the resurgence in ideologically motivated violent criminal activity within the BIE movement. So, yeah, according to this document, black identity extremists are have started retaliatory acts of violence against police officers, because that's happening all over the place right now. Black Lives Matters is going out and shooting cops.
Oh, obviously.
Yeah,
Right?
because that's fucking happening, apparently. And it's just going to feed into more violence against cops. Now, this pisses me off, of course.
Well, yeah.
Because this is some old school 1960s and 70s and 50s and 70s COINTELPRO shit right here. They're about to have every black person who basically doesn't want to be killed, who doesn't want to be treated like a nothing in American society. For any black person that wants to be treated like a normal human, is about to be on their watch list. Yeah. It's about to be on their watch. Your Facebook profiles, your social media accounts, where you speak out against white supremacy and all the terrible shit in society, is about to be under watch. It's probably already under watch. Just to be honest, you're probably already on a list.
Yeah.
This is the world we're living in again. I'm not going to say now. I'm going to say again. And with all that being said, this is coming at a time where literal white supremacy, literal Nazis, are having violent marches where they do attack people, where they do attack police officers. And the sad thing is, the police are, unlike Black Lives Matter rallies and other rallies for other people, the police don't fucking do anything to the Nazis, yet the damn Nazis will literally attack police officers, attack people.
Do you know why though? Especially coming out of the thing in Charlottesville.
Go for it.
The people who were there for the rally were at least as armed as the police officers.
Right.
The police officers were legitimately afraid that firing on anyone who was armed would spark an event that would cause the loss of innocent life, right?
Right. Which, once again, goes into our topic segment. Yeah. So, peaceful, unarmed black, white people who are protesting people's personhoods, protesting the deaths of innocent people over and over again. They're the terrorists.
Obs.
Yeah, obviously. They're the terrorist threats. But the armed, literal Nazis and white supremacists who are more armed than the police, who are spouting violence, who are committing violence, they are not terrorists. What do you have to do as a white person to get called a terrorist in America? I do not know. And once again, we will go into that more in the topic segment.
Yes.
But I understand, but I don't want to get it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want this to be the world. I don't want this to be just the fucking world we're in. But This is it. If you're pro-black, if you don't want to see young black men and women killed by police officers, if you want to say that black people's lives are worth anything in this country, you are now considered to be a terror threat.
Cool. I'll take that one.
Welcome to the list, guys. You know what? Fuck it. Welcome to the resistance.
Yep.
Because if these are the games they want to play, we can play these games. We're going to keep doing what we're doing. We're going to keep fighting against this ridiculous bullshit. And if you want to call us terrorists, fine. Go with that. Bring it on. Because we're going to keep doing what we're doing. And we're going to keep the fight up. So, FBI, fuck it. Let's go. And now I'm definitely on a list.
FBI, all I'm going to say is watch me all you want. Mostly you'll just see me working to help people's lives be better.
Yeah,
that's all I want. Yeah, right? I want to help black people have better lives. And like people of Mexican or South American origin, or like everybody. I just want everybody to have better lives.
Terrorists.
I know, right? Like I want to stop the police from using unnecessary force on people who don't look like me.
You're a regular Osama bin Laden.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
You're a regular Osama bin Laden. Oh, and while we're on this, before we move into topic segment, because once again, it all pertains. Last night, so for those of you who listen, I now live in Brooklyn. So last night I was out trying to enjoy myself on some lampposts. Every so once in a while, I saw these signs, and the signs were warning people about a group of white supremacists. I think they called themselves Rude Boys or something. But a group of white supremacists, violent white supremacists, who have been threatening violence against people of color, which threatening violence against people of color in Brooklyn, New York, is the dumbest thing you can do, considering it's Brooklyn, New York.
Yeah, right.
Like, you're an idiot. You're a bunch of idiots. But it's a group of white supremacists who have been planning to gather in Brooklyn and commit acts of violence. And these posters were warning people, if you see these people, because the leaders of this little sect or whatever are public. It's like, if you see these people, watch out and defend yourself. I have come all the way from Mississippi, where you have to deal with this shit, to Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. And these people are still here, still being fucking stupid. Yet, I'm the terrorist.
Yep.
I went to a fucking rooftop party with a bunch of hipsters last night. I'm the terrorist. My God. Anyway, with that, we're going to move on into our topic segment after a brief musical interlude, as always. And we'll be back here in a moment.
Close your eyes, lean back, remember time it takes is long. That's true about lots of things. Things take time. Things take a while. You could count them if you want to. We could measure things with numbers or some arbitrary scale. Assign them colors, make a qualitative shift now. Things come apart, things come undone. Put them together. Say, I bet you've got exactly what you need in your handbag somewhere. We got a finite amount of most things. We don't have to count them. The good ones. Let's open up a shop. Let's buy a farm. Let's do something somewhere. We got a handsome amount of something. They're just not the kinds of things that you could count now. These things are like water, they're uncountable now. Friendship, justice.
And welcome back. Thank you to our musical guest for that musical interlude. I'm sorry, kind of out of it.
Yeah.
But we're moving into our topics segment, and this obviously has been the biggest news story of the past week, probably whatever. But
Yeah.
as most of you know, there was a massive shooting in Las Vegas last week, where I think it was somewhere around, I think they said around 500 people were injured.
Mm-hmm. Nearly 500 injured and 59 killed, including the shooter who committed suicide.
It's up to 59. Okay.
Yep. No. Yeah, 59.
All right, it was somewhere, last time I checked, it was somewhere around 53.
No, it's 59.
Yeah. So, of course, mass shooting. They say it's the greatest mass shooting in American history. It's more like modern American history. It's definitely not.
To be fair, all of the news sources that I have seen have been saying the largest mass shooting in modern American history.
Right.
They've been specifying that.
When it first happened, they just said American history, and the backlash hit right after, and they were like, "Oh, modern," because
on some of those media sources, some of them are on it. NPR is usually pretty on it like that.
Yeah, NPR is good. Shout out to NPR. But yeah, so this is where we start. Obviously, Vegas. Esmè, do you? We were talking earlier. You said you have some thoughts, so we're going to start with your thoughts today because.
So most of my thoughts that I have, I've been digging into like. So whenever something like this happens, the first thing that you hear is thoughts and prayers, which, fuck it. Fuck your thoughts and prayers. Do something, please. But then the conversation is overwhelmingly dominated by conversations about gun control, right?
Mm-hmm.
But legislators have demonstrated time and time again that gun control is not going to be a thing that happens in the wake of a mass shooting, right? But there are other avenues that we could pursue to help reduce the incidences of this happening, which could be really, really helpful, right? And they get glossed over completely in most of the conversations about why these things happen and how to prevent them from happening in the future.
Right.
So yeah, that's what I wanted to dig into.
What things are you talking about? Like,
okay, so one rant that I've been hearing a lot on Facebook lately because of the circles that I run in on Facebook is how whenever a mass shooting is committed by a white person, they're a lone wolf or they're mentally ill or they're sick or whatever, instead of labeling them as a terrorist, which this was a terrorist act, right? This was an event that was this was a situation that was designed to kill and injure many, many people and to spread confusion and hysteria and panic in a large crowd of people. This was a terrorist act.
And for people who don't know, like, because there are plenty of people who just like look at the news and go on whatever. Like this was planned, it was coordinated. Like this wasn't just a random act of violence. This man prepared very well to maximize the damage he would do.
Yeah, he had upwards of 10 weapons. How many did they finally say he had with him in the hotel room? Like 11 or 12?
I am not even sure. And it was planned enough to send his girlfriend away when it happened. Also planned enough to go out and get those the attachments. There are attachments that make semi-automatic weapons automatic weapons. And he went out and got those, which first of all, there are no reason those should be on the market at all. Like, in truth, you cannot purchase automatic weapons. You can get semi-automatic weapons, but real automatic weapons are illegal for the general public. But you can purchase semi-autos and buy that attachment to make them automatic weapons. Yeah. And there's no reason for those to exist. No reason other than mass murder. like there's no argument for that. Sorry. That was my little aside. There's no argument for that. There's no argument for that attachment to be available. That is just there for murder, for mass murder. But I digress. Go on.
Yes. Anyway, so like I was saying, the overwhelming dialogue about these events, if the shooter is a white, is that he overwhelmingly, right? I think in the last 10 years or something, there have been 2 mass shootings committed by women, right? Overwhelmingly he is sick or is mentally ill or is a lone wolf or blah, 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 whatever, right? And that's the... I
was just going to say, this time, my favorite thing was he was just a simple country music fan. That was a headline.
Yeah. But coming back around to how great NPR is, one of the segments that they had on this week, the other day, a couple days ago, was a piece with Shankar Vedantam, who is my favorite, who's a social science correspondent for NPR, has a podcast, is pretty great, where he was talking about how mental illness is actually a factor in these kinds of events, right? The willingness to commit anonymous acts of violence is a diagnostic criterion for several mental illnesses. Right. This is not completely unrelated. Near as they can figure with the research that's been done on the data that they have, is something like 40% of people who commit mass murder like this are actually diagnosed mentally ill or can be diagnosed mentally ill, right? However, the problem isn't that we call white shooters mentally ill. The problem is that we don't call brown shooters mentally ill, right? It's there's that disparity, right? And they went a little bit into some of the reasons that we have that disparity, and we're going to get into it in a second. But the main point that really stuck with me is that using mentally ill to describe all shooters, or like even to the point of overusing that term when you're talking about large violent events like this, and recognizing that it's an illness, not something to look down on, could actually go a long way toward reducing the incidences of these things, right? If you could look at people who are committing these acts of violence and recognize that it's overwhelmingly a symptom of something, some imbalance or something that's wrong or something that is causing them like of an illness, we could start to figure out actual systemic ways to help reduce the incidences of these, right? To help people who have mental illnesses that are leading them to act out violently, to help them get that under control and to help prevent that from being a problem, to help prevent them from acting out violently and in the future, right? To reduce the chances of them going out and committing these things.
Well, and see, and that's another issue. Like when we start to consider mental illness, that it is an illness that needs to be treated and needs to be looked at, that can stop it, that would make our society have to look at the fact that mental illness is an issue in our society.
Yes.
A major issue. And that's something people still don't want to look at.
Yes.
One of the, like, the news will start throwing around mental illness, of course, when events like these happen, but they say, oh, it's mentally ill, and then walk past it. They don't They
Right.
they
And
don't want to discuss. Yeah.
yeah, and it's because mental illness is so othered and so stigmatized, right?
Right.
It's something that people are uncomfortable talking about it, and so they don't. Which
Which is
sucks, right?
and it's here's the thing. And it's just when it comes to mental illness. Mental illness describes such a broad range of things.
Yes.
And most people, this is just how it works, because no one's brain chemistry is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Most people have some sort of mental illness because there's always going to be some sort of imbalance in your brain.
Yeah.
So whether it is anxiety, depression, or obsessive compulsive, all the way down the spectrum to schizophrenia. So most everyone has something. And I think the recognition that mental illness is it's not an outlier. Like, it's not something that's just out there and some people are affected by it. But if it was understood more that we are all affected in our lives at some point by some sort of mental illness that we go through, and that some people need more intensive treatment.
Yeah. Right. It's
Just
it's like allergies, right? Like
Right.
lots of people have allergies. For some people, like, your allergy means that you get really sneezy for a few weeks during pollen season, and for some people your allergies mean that you need to carry your EpiPen, otherwise you'll die if somebody in the same room as you is eating peanuts, right?
Right.
Like, these things are all on a spectrum, and they affect some people more than others, and some people are not affected at all or very rarely affected, right? But if we can destigmatize talking about this thing, then we can really legitimately start to figure out how to people see mental illness as some kind of personal weakness, instead of recognizing that it's, first off, an illness, and second off, it's like a public health problem, right?
Right.
Everything in our economy everything in our country can be affected by people's mental illness, right? Like, if people are dealing with untreated mental illness, they're less productive at work. They take more sick days. They have issues. People who are dealing with severe mental illnesses without medication have a hard time holding down jobs, have a hard time maintaining housing, there are so many things that are affected by it. And if we could talk about it instead of seeing it as something that is that's a weakness, that's stigmatized, we would go a long way toward reducing the effects that it has in our society, including being able to identify and intervene when people are dealing with violent impulses that they are having trouble controlling because of their mental illness that leads them to do crap like this. Right. Sorry, I did kind of interrupt you. I'm sorry.
No. I'm right along with you. Interruption was more than fine.
Yeah.
But you're most definitely right.
And there's a few other issues that I want to get into, but I'll let you finish your thought. Sorry.
Well, I was just saying we talk about prevention, but we as a society never want to do the steps that actually help prevent things.
Yeah.
Even simplest ones of acknowledging mental illness as a thing.
It's that damn Protestant work ethic that's so ingrained in the fabric of what it means to be American, right? Because mental illness isn't an illness to so many people, right? It's a personal weakness, and weakness is something to be suppressed and powered through.
Right.
Right? You don't talk about your weakness. You just deal with it on your own as quietly as possible. Right?
And look, you always forget God can fix it.
Yes.
Because in most cases when you're sick, you go to the doctor, and it's usually a combination of prayer and doctor fixes most other illness. But when it comes to mental illness, that's just a God illness. You don't have to see anyone for that.
Yeah.
But I digress.
Yes. But so there's a couple other issues related to the thing with mental illness that I wanted to talk about before we move on to my other things that I have thoughts about.
Let's go for it.
Right. So the first one I sort of touched on before, which is that the problem with talking about a shooter and mental illness isn't necessarily in talking about that person being affected by mental illness. The problem is that there's a really racially specific way that we talk about shooters, and it's not fair, right? People who are black or brown who commit mass murder like this are overwhelmingly called terrorists or thugs or what have you, and white people who commit these are called ill, right? And really, really, like I was saying, really the ability or the willingness to commit this kind of mass violent act is a strong indicator that anybody who could commit an act like this is probably very likely to be mentally ill, right? The willingness to disregard human life in that kind of massive scale is a symptom of several mental illnesses, right? And so really we need to be focusing on, we really ought to call everyone who was committing this default to talking about them as having a mental illness. And that might lead to some kind of intervention on mental illness, or it might not, because we would need to drastically change how we talk about mental illness in this country in order for that to be effective. But that's a different thing.
I'm sorry. There was something I wanted to say with the racial issue, or how we talk about that. Here's the thing. The majority of mass shooters in this country is just like the majority of serial killers in this country. And they're white males.
White Christian men.
White Christian men.
Yes. Overwhelmingly. White Christian men.
There is a certain amount. Okay, the reason, and one of the major reasons that is, besides the fucked up mentality that our society has, is that access to the tools to cause these things are more readily available to white Christian men.
Well, I would say to white men in general. Right.
True.
There's not a religious test when you go in to buy a gun, right? It just happens to be that the majority of, a large percentage of white men happen to be Christian. And also Christianity, this particular brand of kyriarchy, leads white Christian men to want to, I don't know, something. I don't think that the Christianity of these people, their particular personal version of Christian faith, is irrelevant. I don't think that it is irrelevant to the acts that they commit.
I have a quandary on that, but I'll go with it for now.
I'm curious now.
Okay, and this is a quick quandary. If a white guy dressed in, let's say, more traditional Muslim garb walked in to a gun shop, do you think he would be served the same way as a white Christian man?
Okay, what do you mean by Muslim garb, though?
Okay. Let's say he came in. I can't remember what they're called, and that's where this is where my cultural I can't remember shit comes from. You know, the let's say a white guy with the like with a beard and like the long like roby thing. And I sound like a just moron right now, but I can't remember the names of any of these things.
I think I know what you're talking. I do know what you're talking about. And I don't know, because that style of dress is very uncommon. I wonder. That's interesting.
Yeah, see, that's where my quandary was coming in on that. But once again, another digression. But there's a certain amount, like, you have to be able to get these things. Like, you have to be able to get the tools to commit these crimes. And it is much easier for certain people, white men, especially white men with a good amount of money, to get these things.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it is. It's just much easier for them to get these tools. This guy in Vegas, he was a known gambler. Like, he had plenty of money. He's a known gambler, dropping $10,000 a day. No one looked at him a second time when he went in and bought all of these weapons.
Yeah.
They wouldn't think to, because to them, this person, this white man, is not a threat at all. Yet, for some reason, in this country, though overwhelmingly, it's been shown that this is the demographic that poses the most threat in this area, we still have the idea that this demographic is not it's not a dangerous demographic at all.
Yeah.
And it's an obvious answer as to why that is. Like, and when we're talking about, you know, the stigma of mental illness and accepting it more, currently the idea of mental illness is used as basically a gift to this demographic to opt out.
Yeah, it's an excuse.
It's to opt out of the same scrutiny.
Yeah. Right. They're not subject to the same scrutiny, and it excuses these. It excuses these acts, right? It helps them avoid accountability for committing horrific acts, which is unfair, and it's not right, and it's preventing us from like actually dealing with problems.
And also, the Trump administration rolled back the statute.
I don't even want to talk about that.
Yeah. So it just seems kind of telling to me as the statute is removed. You apply the
for our listeners, though, tell us what the statute is.
But I once again, I can't tell you the exact statute, but it's basically a statute that more or less helps prevent mentally ill people from buying weapons. That should come as a no-brainer, because you don't want somebody causing harm to anyone or themselves with a weapon. Yeah. That's just how it is. But what we're saying, the Trump administration wrote that statute, and it seemed very telling that the way they use as an excuse for the white male demographic when it comes to these things rolls right along with the the now ability of mentally ill people to buy weapons.
Yeah.
So it basically makes it a lot easier it makes it even easier to go when these instances happen to go, oh, this white man was mentally ill.
Yeah. Yeah.
And once again, it makes it excuses these people from being terrorists. And considering the climate, and I talked about this a little bit. I talked about this a lot in the news segment. The climate of you have more white supremacists around. You having more.
Condi.
But I think it's pretty telling that with all this upswelling of white supremacy and Nazism and this advocation of violence against people, against marginalized people, especially, you have this rollback of that statute. Mm-hmm. You have the application of mental illness only, really, when it comes to white males. It's almost an excuse for these people to go out and commit acts of violence and excuse it.
But also there's another thing that I wanted to get into about that they talked about on that segment on NPR that was actually really interesting.
Go for it.
Which is that one of the reasons that we pull out mental illness when we're talking about acts like mass acts like this is that we like Americans collectively are trying to distance ourselves from the person who committed the act, right? And it's really, really easy. So America is still majority white, majority Christian, right? So if a person who commits a horrifying act is black or is Muslim or is Hispanic or whatever, it's really, really easy it's really easy for white Christians to distance themselves by blaming it on blackness or Islam or being Hispanic, right? But when a white Christian commits an act of a mass act of violence like this, white Christians have to find some way to distance themselves from that. And the way that has shown up, and it keeps being repeated because now it's part of our cultural script about acts like this, is that person is sick, right? Which continues to feed the stigma of mental illness. Like, let's be real about that, right? It continues to other people who suffer from mental illnesses to refer to these people as like people who commit huge massive acts of violence as mentally ill because of the script that surrounds that. But that's one of the reasons that we overwhelmingly label white Christians who commit acts of violence as mentally ill instead of calling them terrorists, right? Because it's a psychological thing.
And I was going to say it's also the same reason they're called lone wolves.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can't tie it back to something that may be systematic.
Yes.
It has to be something that's individual.
Exactly.
Which really, I mean, of course it's not the case, because these acts and the people these acts are like committed by, there is a pattern, a very clear, very, very clear pattern over the years.
Yeah.
So every time it comes up, they're lone wolves, they're mentally ill, blah, blah, blah. You get to excuse yourself and people like you from taking, I can't think of the word. I'm sorry for everyone for my brain farts today. Taking responsibility for what's happening. And that's a major problem for me, because besides the obvious reasons, but for every other group in America, if one person does anything, it's never individual.
Yeah.
It's never lone wolf. It's never mental illness. When anybody else does anything, they are the picture. They are the representative of their people.
Yep.
If I was to go out and snatch a purse right now, which I would never do, of course, but if I was to go out and punch some lady and take her purse, I'm going to be on the news, and they're going to be like, this is what black people do.
Yep.
Esmè, even you, as a white woman, if it was known that you were LGBT, and let's say that was known, and you go out and do something.
Just call me queer, Keem.
Queer, yeah. Queer works.
That's my word of choice.
I'm still working on the nomenclature.
That's my personal word of choice. For anybody out there who takes offense to queer, we'll call you what you want to be called, but queer is my word of choice. Anyway,
right.
If it were known that I was queer,
if people were known you were queer, if you went out and did something, it's gonna cut. You're going to be the face of queer people that day. Like your action is going to speak for everyone.
Yep.
However, when a white man does, and that even extends to women.
Yes.
Like if a woman goes out and does something, that's the fake. Women are crazy.
Yes.
Always a thing.
Yes. Or if it were known that I was atheist.
Right. It's going to be godless atheists.
Yes.
Kill Christian.
Have no morals, right?
Right. But only white men get to be excused. They get to not be the faces of their demographic. They get to be lone wolves.
Yeah.
They get to be sick. And that's bullshit.
Yep.
And that also keeps putting white men, it keeps allowing them to remain in these positions where they can commit more acts of violence. Because there's nobody calling anything into account ever. There's no responsibility. There's no accounts. It's just the same repeated tale over and over again, and I can't say no one, but the majority of people still refuse to come out and acknowledge what's happening.
Yep.
I know black people acknowledge what's happening because we're tired of that shit.
Yeah.
And personally, with all that, you have a recipe. You have this very volatile recipe that makes life right now feel extraordinarily dangerous.
Yeah.
I'm nervous anytime there's a large-scale event. And it's not... I remember post 9/11, everyone was afraid of terror attacks, quote unquote.
Yeah.
They were afraid of Muslims and anyone who looked... my favorite word back then was someone of terrorist descent.
I know, right?
Because, yeah, that's a thing. But back then, after 9/11, everyone was afraid of Muslims. And after that act, yet we have a history of repeated acts by a demographic, and no one says a thing. And like I said, I'm scared. Every time I will avoid large-scale events. Because not because of my social anxiety, which is real.
Yeah.
But because in a lot of times I do not feel safe. Because this recipe we have, this very volatile recipe we have where white men, and it's where white men have this cover where they can act on violent impulses, whether it be from mental illness or from some really fucked up ideology.
Yeah.
But either way, they have this open door to commit massive acts of violence against innocent people, and there's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah.
We can only do something about it as a people. That's like so Comic-Con is in New York this weekend. And if anybody knows anything about comics and Netflix and Marvel or whatever, they're coming out with a Punisher show. Well, at Comic-Con this year, they canceled the Punisher panel, and they moved back the premiere of the Punisher television series. And it was a reaction to the Vegas shooting. But with that being said, I want people to take a look at the Punisher. Now, I've read the Punisher for years. I've seen the Punisher or whatever. The Punisher very much is a mentally ill white man who commits acts of violence.
Yeah.
Very brutal acts of violence. Now, Punisher gets to be a quote-unquote hero, even though most of the heroes don't consider him that. They consider him a murderer. but he gets to be quote unquote a hero or anti-hero because he kills bad guys.
Yeah.
But they have a real acknowledgement in those books that he, like, this person is not okay at all. But I mean that speaks to the psychology of our country in general.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Punisher is the very like image of that. He's a murderer.
Yeah.
He's very severely mentally ill. Yet he's held in such popularity. And even Disney and Marvel recognize, even though they're going forward with the show, and I'm going to watch the show. I mean, whatever. Like I said, I've read The Punisher for years. And some very interesting stories come out of that, you know, especially when done right, when it's acknowledged that this person is a danger. This person is, while he's killing criminals, he is in fact a murderer. He is in fact someone who should not be celebrated. Mm-hmm. But even Disney and Marvel recognizes that this is not something that needs to be okay.
Yeah.
So that was my little rant.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to come back around to one more thing about mental illness before we get off this particular approach to this topic. Which is, so I have been called out by one of my friends who is an advocate for mentally ill people. Like she herself has mental illnesses, and this is one of, like, she and I have had this conversation multiple times over the last 10 years, right? Where it's not enough just to acknowledge that, yeah, these people are probably mentally ill, because right now in America, the conversation about mental illness, like I've said, is overwhelmingly overwhelmingly focused on othering people who have mental illnesses, and we don't approach it in a nuanced way at all in the American dialogue for most places, right? Like in the mainstream dialogue about mental illness, everyone with every kind of mental illness is lumped together.
Right.
And so it's not just enough to say, oh, well, he was mentally ill, so we should prevent mentally ill people from buying guns, or whatever, right? Because there are some mental illnesses that lead people to act out violently against other people, or that make them more likely to be able to do that, right? For most of us, there's we would not be able to do that kind of thing. Like our own sense of humanity prevents us from doing that. But there are some mental illnesses that allow people to other themselves from humanity enough to be able to commit that, right? And not see anything wrong with it. There are other mental illnesses that cause people to be more likely to harm themselves, right? There are some mental illnesses that just make it really hard for people to deal with regular stresses in life, right? Mental illness is not one thing.
It's a broad, very broad range.
Yeah, it's an extremely broad category that encompasses all kinds of different symptoms, all kinds of different impulses, all kinds of different mental imbalances that affect different kinds of people in different ways. There is no one way of saying, there's no one thing that says this person is mentally ill and so we should do this, right? We need to expand the conversation on mental illness to both allow for a conversation about mass shootings as a symptom of mental illness and to hold people who commit these things accountable, because you can't just say, oh, well, he was mentally ill and that excuses it. No, he has to, like, you have to hold people accountable for doing things, even though they're mentally ill. And you have to have a nuanced conversation about mental illness that doesn't lump every person who has a mental illness together and assume that person is violent, right?
Right.
I have a lot of friends who deal with depression and anxiety. None of those people is like terribly violent. In fact, most of my friends who have depression and anxiety are consciously and intentionally not violent, right? Many of them are also pacifists. Like these are not the same thing, right? Like the kind of mental imbalance that you have to be able to go shoot hundreds of people, like anonymously and randomly and with the intention of causing as much damage and chaos as possible, is completely different from somebody who just can't, like, go to work one day because their depression has them, like, bedridden, right? Those are two different things, but we lump them together in the American dialogue as if they were the same.
Right.
And that's really dangerous, right? Lumping all those things together is really dangerous. It leads to laws and regulations that are not appropriate for everybody, and it prevents people from getting the kind of help that they would need in some cases, right? Like, this is it sucks.
Yeah.
But so do not think that because I'm so focused on this as a mental, on mass violence as a mental health issue in this conversation so far, please do not assume that I mean that every single person with a mental illness has the potential to go out and do this thing. I do not think that is true. I do not think that is true.
Every single person ever, you mentally ill or not, has the potential to go out and do this thing. Like, potential. Now so like you can't. You're right. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's something. You can honestly avoid. You could honestly avoid having to worry if there were some kind of actual, extensive process for buying weapons. You probably could avoid a lot of this.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, right? I'm just really, really tired of the gun control conversation, right? Because time and time again, it's been demonstrated that, like, nobody's going to do it. This is the thing, right? If Republicans didn't call for better gun control legislation after Newtown, why would they do it now?
I'll tell you why they would do it. If black, because it's happened already. It happened in California. If black people or other marginalized groups started openly, massively arming, that would flip in a moment. Because it happened in California when the Black Panthers came into town and started telling black people, hey, you have a right to own weapons and you can go buy them. And they started going to buy them. And Reagan and California's good old gun laws got a lot more strict.
Yeah.
So, you want to get real? You want to see it? Let that start happening.
Yeah.
I want this. I did want to say one thing about the gun control thing. The one thing I don't understand is truly do not understand is that if I go get a car, what do I have to have? I have to have license.
Mm-hmm.
I have to have, which with the license, I have to be tested that I know the ins and outs of the vehicle.
Yes.
The rules of the vehicle.
Yes.
And then I'm tested in my operation of said vehicle.
Yes. And you're given several non-invasive medical tests to make sure that you have the physical capacity to safely operate the vehicle.
Exactly. Now, after I get my license, when I get that vehicle, what do I have to have? I got to have registration.
Yes.
Yes.
My vehicle's registered. I got to have insurance.
Yes.
I have to have all these things to operate a car.
Yes.
And it's the understanding that we have to have all these things to operate a car.
Yes.
And this is through statutes and the courts, because I've gone over it in class.
Yep.
Statutes and the courts, that a car can be imminently dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
It is a huge machine that, if operated negligently, can harm someone.
Yep.
So we have to have all these things to operate a car. Yet a gun, which by its very definition is imminently dangerous.
Yep.
It is what it does.
Yep.
A car is dangerous when used negligently. A gun is dangerous by the very aspect of it being a gun.
Yeah.
It's what it's for.
Yes.
We do not have these same steps and measures in gun ownership. I am not talking about taking away people's guns. That is not something I'm talking about. Because Second Amendment rights. If you want a gun, if you want a weapon, have a weapon.
Yes.
But if these are the standards we have to go through for cars, because cars are dangerous, and we've acknowledged that cars are dangerous, I want the same measures for something that is in its nature dangerous.
Yeah.
Like that is not something that's difficult to comprehend. That is not something that's asking for anything difficult or more or illogical. This is not liberal propaganda. I'm not posing anything that's unreasonable.
Yeah.
It's something that logic dictates. Because if measures were put in place, just like measures were put in place for a car, the likelihood of these incidents occurring would go down. And it would also cut down on incidents of people shooting themselves.
Yep.
Because they don't have they're not weapon safe. It would cut down on people like dropping, like doing something they know they probably shouldn't with their gun and dropping it and shooting themselves. Like you could cut down on so many things if you just do what we normally do for anything else that is dangerous. And that makes no sense to me. Like, that makes zero sense to me.
Right.
I mean, either put those limitations, either put those things down on guns like we have on cars, or take away the things with the cars. Take away driver's licenses, take away insurance, take away registration. I want it all gone, because what's the point? I mean, we're making a statement that something that's already dangerous doesn't need it, we should take it off of cars too.
Yep.
Sorry, and that was my spiel on gun control.
It's a good spiel. I like it.
It's a simple spiel. It's not one that people would get confused by.
It's the same as my spiel.
Oh my God. Anything else you want to mention?
There is one other thing that I wanted to talk about that's not related to gun control. I mean, it's not directly related to gun control. There's a tie-in.
Okay.
So there's one act that has been demonstrated to be heavily correlated with incidents of mass shooting, as in nearly all of the a majority of the mass shooters that have been investigated in this country have been shown to have also done this thing at some point.
Go.
Do you know what it
What
is?
is it? Mm-mm.
Domestic violence.
Oh,
Yeah. But it's, again, something that is completely glossed over and not talked about as something that is as an avenue for preventing this kind of event from happening. Right? So, like, right now in this country, it is not legal to buy guns if you are convicted of domestic violence.
mm-hmm.
Right? But as of right now, like I said, if you are convicted of domestic violence, you cannot own guns. But this is not enforced strictly. Right? There have been it's been shown that being convicted of domestic violence can prevent, like, you get put on a list and you can't buy guns anymore. But they're not doing any sort of monitoring to see if these people are getting guns by illegal means. If they have guns stashed in the house already before they're convicted, right? Like, they're not doing thorough searches to make sure that these people don't have guns already. They're not doing, and it's only based on conviction, right? So in order for this to be effective, right, for people convicted of domestic violence, first off, their partner would have to be willing and able to undergo the process of officially filing a report, right? Which, given the realities of intimate partner abuse in this country, they might not be able to do that, right? If their abusive partner has financial control over them, there are so many reasons why somebody might not be willing or able to even begin that process, right?
Right.
Which is an issue that needs to be dealt with in and of itself. Like, that's a huge issue in our country, that people need to be able to file reports against their partner who is abusing them without putting their financial and their financial lives in jeopardy, without putting their without putting their housing situation in jeopardy, right? If you know that you will become homeless as a result of going through this process, like that's not a fair situation to be put in. But in any case, the point is, right, only people who are convicted of domestic violence will ever be put on one of these lists, right? But we have a system for dealing with domestic violence right now that, first off, makes it extremely unlikely that domestic violence is actually going to be reported and investigated. Second off, as recent events in Memphis have made very, very clear, even if it is reported, the chances of it going to court and there being a conviction are very, very slim, right? Because it's not prioritized at all. It's not prioritized at all. Overwhelmingly, the concerns of people who are victims of domestic violence are dismissed, right? Even by police, right? Like, you can go to the police, a woman could go to the police and say, I am being abused by my partner or whatever, and the police will say, oh, get some counseling or work it out, right? Instead of treating it seriously. But so there needs to be some first off, domestic violence needs to be taken seriously, especially since it has been shown to have a high correlation with acts of violence like this, right? Mm-hmm. In the overwhelming majority of mass shootings that occur in this country, not just the large scale ones that make the news, but mass shootings in general, in the overwhelming majority of these mass shootings, they're committed by white men, and an overwhelming majority of them, a current or former partner was included among the victims. Mm-hmm. This is not always a random act, right? There are not currently motivations. They're still investigating possible motives for the Vegas shooting, especially since this man's partner was out of the country when it happened, right? They don't know yet why this happened. But there has been a mass shooting, what the US legal system classifies as a mass shooting, every day in 2017 in the United States. And in the majority of those, the shooter was targeting a current or former partner. And overwhelmingly, it's a man targeting a female partner. So there needs to be some kind of systemic overhaul for how domestic violence is dealt with in this country, and how and that needs to be a consideration. Like, I'm not saying necessarily, like, one of the things that I've seen pop up is that if you're even accused, if you have any accusations or any police reports on you about domestic violence, that should put you on a watch list that delays the process for you getting a gun. Which, yes, I can see how that would be a good thing, but also I'm not sure of the legality and the constitutionality of doing something based on an accusation, right? Like, I'm not sure about that. Like, I'm leaning towards it, but also, but we need to find some way of taking that into account, right? Like, even though this shooting in Vegas was not directed at his girlfriend, there have been multiple reports that have come out since the shooting that said that he was verbally abusive toward his girlfriend in public. Like, there have been people who have witnessed him being verbally and, like, emotionally abusive to his girlfriend. So it's like, this is something that has to be taken into account. We have to have this conversation too, instead of glossing over it.
It's kind of like this country has a problem with some sort of toxic masculinity.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I don't know where I could have gotten that from.
I have no idea, man.
Jesus Christ.
But yeah, so that's a thing.
You're very right. Very right. Anything else?
I don't think so.
Well, I was just going to say my final thing is, and I'm going to say this a lot, people, I'm sorry, fuck your thoughts and prayers. Like, at this point, stop. when things like this happen, going pray for Vegas or pray for whatever, you're not doing anything except trying to, like, one, excuse yourself from feeling anything for real.
Yeah.
And two, you're trying to ignore what's actually happening. You're removing yourself of any, like, liability, any responsibility, any thought of having to deal with anything.
Yeah.
Stop it. Just stop.
Yeah. People offer thoughts and prayers instead of offering action and real solutions.
Right. Like, if you're not saying anything, if you're not offering solutions, if you're not supporting solutions, then fuck your thoughts and prayers. Keep them. Keep it. You're not doing anything.
Yeah.
You're just doing it to make yourself feel better. And that's selfish and that's bullshit.
Yep.
No matter how many times you change your Instagram photo and your Facebook photo.
Yeah.
That's my last thing. That's also, I actually take it back. One more thing before we move into the sex segment. People, conspiracy theorists, stop that shit. Okay? These mass shootings that are happening every day at this point, they're not government false flags. They're not plants to get something to happen. These are symptoms of problems in our society. These things happen because there are things wrong with American society right now, things that we need to be looking at, things that we need to be trying to fix, things that we need to be confronting. That is why these things are happening, okay? It's not a conspiracy. It's not some bullshit whatever, okay? And every time you come up with these new conspiracy theories, every time you put this fake, stupid information out there, you are taking actual thought away from solving the actual problems. You're excusing the things that are actually happening for something that's bullshit. And we will never be able to confront anything or change anything if you keep doing this dumb shit. So stop posting conspiracy theory garbage. And I'm done.
Yes. Okay.
And with that, we're going to move into the sex segment after another brief musical interlude.
Yes. Enjoy. Welcome back. Thanks again to our musical guest for this week. We love having musical people on. So if you want your music featured, please contact us. We try really hard to make sure that we can bring you guys awesome music. So get in touch with us if you want to be featured, or if you know somebody who might want to be featured. Anyway, welcome back to the sex segment. Let's talk about something a little happier. Today we are going back to the anatomy of the vulva and talking about the A spot. Keem, do you know about the A spot?
I do. No, I do not.
Okay, so the A spot is something that I discovered pretty recently, like in 2017, right? Like just learned that it was a thing and that people talk about, and that it feels really good. But it's not talked about very often. But so shout out to Kate Sloan over at girlyjuice.net who introduced me to this. Since then, I went digging and found out a little bit more about it. So everybody, I quote, everybody knows, right, about the G-spot, right? It's, even if you are not 100% sure where it is and what it does, you are aware that it exists, probably, and whatever. Which it totally does exist, by the way. It also feels really good for a lot of people. Anyway. But the A-spot, for some reason, people don't know. I don't know. So the A-spot is like the G-spot. It's an area inside the vagina that feels really excellent when it's stimulated for many people, right? Like, your mileage may vary. Not everybody's body's the same, whatever. But it's not talked about very often. So the A-spot is, the actual anatomical name for that spot is the anterior fornix, which if you are like fingers deep in a vagina, to find the A-spot, go all the way back and find where the cervix is. And it's the spot that's right in front of the cervix. Like, as you go all the way back in, like, you'll kind of feel it open up at the back where the cervix is, and it's right in front of the cervix. So if you have your fingers inside of somebody with a vagina who's laying on their back, it'll be on the front, like on the top, like in front of where the cervix is. And it's really awesome. Just like with like anything, how, like, exactly how that should be stimulated depends on the person. But it's a spot that's kind of difficult to get to in most kinds of sex. Especially if you're not particularly looking for, if you're not especially like making a point to access it, it gets kind of glossed over. So a lot of people don't realize that it's there. And that it can be really, really amazing. So, Keem, question so far?
No.
Because I'm kind of rambling. Whatever.
No, I'm good so far.
Okay. So, this area, one of the really, really interesting things one of the interesting things about this is that stimulation of this particular zone, like A-spot, whatever, can, in many people, in fact, anecdotally in most people that I have read about, increases production of natural lubrication.
Oh.
Right. So stimulating this spot will help this particular vagina be wetter. In most cases, anecdotally, right? It just has to do with the anatomy of that spot. So if you have difficulty with natural lubrication and you would like to you would like to find some ways of increasing that, try stimulating your A-spot. It might help. Who knows? But yeah, like I said, though, it's kind of difficult to access, right? Like, it's way far back there. So depending on the depth of the vagina and the length of the fingers being inserted, right, you may not be able to reach it with your fingers, especially if you're trying to do it yourself, right? Like, I can get up there, but it takes some maneuvering and it takes some like flexibility and some positioning. And especially if you have mobility issues, it might be really difficult or even impossible to get yourself into a position where you can reach that yourself. Depending on if you have an especially long vagina and your partner has short fingers, it may be extremely difficult for your partner to hit that too, depending on lots of different factors, right? With their fingers, right? The good news is we've got things for that.
Things.
Right. So what you're going to want to look for in a toy that's going to help you access that spot is probably going to be something that has a pretty pronounced curve, but not a really like angled curve, right? Like something that has a really like hard angle on it is going to be something that's more designed for G-spot stimulation, which is a lot shallower, right? Like I have a toy called the Jopin Key. Is that what it's called? I don't remember. There's a toy by Jopin that I have that's got a really steep angle on it that's not good at, it doesn't work for A-spot because I can't get it in far enough, right? The angle on it is too steep. It goes straight for my G-spot, but it doesn't go, it's too steep to go to my A-spot. I have one, the Vixen Mustang. That's got a pretty pronounced curve on it that goes straight for my A-spot, but I've found that my A-spot can take some pretty firm stimulation, and the Mustang being a Vixen Vixskin, which is a dual density, is too flexible and it doesn't hit the spot the right way for me. So somebody who finds that they like a little more gentle stimulation, that might be really, really good for, or that Vixen makes a couple other models with different sizes that might be nice also. Or they make some single density ones that are a little bit firmer that might work. I do not have my hands on any of those, so I have not been able to try them and see if they work better. But they have that pronounced upward curve. Honestly, the toy that I have that works the best is the pink glass one.
Oh yeah.
Right. The pink glass one is really, really nice. It's made by Icicles, which is owned by Pipe Dream, which I'm not going to buy anything else from Pipe Dream because reasons. You can go back a few episodes and listen to my rant about toy industry ethics, for why I personally choose not to buy anything made by Pipe Dream. But if you're looking for a glass toy, though, and budget is an issue, I think I said in that episode also, like, Icicles is pretty decent. They're decent quality at a really good price point for glass, right? In any case. But, so this toy that I have, it's got a really gentle, like, S-curve on it, right? Like, it's not a huge, big, swoopy, curvy S-curve, but it's a really gentle, like, S-curve. And the heads, it's got two heads on it, so you can flip it around and use it either way, and the texture on both ends is different. One of them has a spiral around it, and one of them has dots. Which, depending on what I'm feeling, whatever. But in order, but the ends on both heads are not a round ball; they're slightly pointed, so it's a little bit more focused, and that fits right up into that A spot. The only complaint I have about that toy is that it's a little short. It's a little on the short side. It's probably like maybe I want to say like 7 inches in length, not including the heads. But so when I get really, really turned on, like it's sometimes like all you can do to get it all the way up in there, right? Which depending on how your body is, that may or may not be the right length for you, right? If your vagina is shorter than mine, that might work better. But I found that gentle S-curve is really, really good for getting right up into that spot. It just happens to be angled just right, and it gets right up into that spot. And the firmness on that toy really, really works for me and my A spot. But it might be overwhelming for people who have a less, I don't know, demanding, I think. A less demanding A spot.
Less demanding.
Less demanding, right? Yeah. My A spot and my G spot both just really like to be just like pummeled most of the time. right? There's a reason. Like, all of my favorite toys are glass or metal and are very strong, like heavily curved. Most of them are very large. Like, I don't know. My vagina is weird, but in a great way. That's what I'm saying. But so, guys, A spot. Get your hand all the way up in there. Play around with it. It's a whole thing. It's fantastic, in my opinion. I mean, like I said, your mileage may vary, but if you have never gone looking for the A spot, please do, because I want everybody to have the best sex that they can have. And if you have never gone looking for the A spot and you're like, what is this A spot? I am not sure. If you like really deep penetration, that might be one of the things that it's hitting, that is causing you to like that. That might be one of the things. And so you should definitely, if you like to be fucked really deep, like, definitely go looking for that spot and see if that's what's going on. There's also another spot behind the cervix that's less commonly an erogenous zone, I guess, but it might also be something for you. So I don't know, just play around all the way up in there.
Play around all the way up in there.
Yeah. The only other thing about the A spot is that it's sometimes difficult to hit during, like, regular PIV penetrative sex. But there are some angles that can help with that. So receiving partner on their back with their legs up can help. The way that the angle works with that, it can make it more likely for you to hit the A spot. Which is one of the reasons I like that position so much. I have discovered, now that I know that that's actually a thing. But play around with it. And again, right, like, it's a vagina depth, penis length, like, angle sort of thing that may make it more likely for you to hit that spot during partnered sex, or like during partnered PIV. Like, you could have PIV without a partner, whatever, you know what I mean? But, like, it may or may not be possible for you and your partner to hit that spot during, like, PIV, but it might be. So play with it. Google it. I'm going to give you guys resources. It's a whole thing.
And just for future reference, not my future reference, I know, but for our listeners, where exactly is the spot again?
Okay, so let me walk you through this mental scenario. So you have a partner who has a vagina. Your partner's laying on their back. You're gonna insert your hand palm up, insert your fingers palm up, and it's all the way back on the front, right? Like, up by, like, imagine that you're trying to, like, reach for their belly button on the inside, right? That's what you're looking for. So, like, on the front, all the way back, and you'll go in, if you go in all the way and find their cervix, it's right in front of the cervix. So, like, when your fingers are in the right spot, the back of your fingers, like where your fingernail is in this position, the back of your fingers will be right next to the cervix. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, no, I got you.
Okay. I am going to include links to articles that have diagrams, because I feel like I've explained it as well as I can, and if you still don't know what I'm talking about, you might be helped by a picture, because there's only so much I can do with words. Right?
Picture!
All the way in and up, and the back of your fingernails, like, your fingernails are like next to the cervix. That's what.
Also, cut your fingernails.
Yes, please cut your fingernails. Keep those bitches trimmed, right? Like, I have seen and have read anecdotal evidence that it is possible to finger someone well with long fingernails. However, it's a skill. And also, there's, like, if you have really wicked talents, there's only so much that you can do, right? Like, I don't know. Cut your fingernails. Cut your fingernails unless you and your partner have negotiated that.
This is from someone with long fingers and long nails. Cut your fingernails.
Yes. Yes. And then file them, because that jaggedy edge that you missed when you were no, we don't want that. Ouch. 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 That would hurt. Anyway. So, that's a thing.
All right. I guess that's it.
Yay! Go have good sex, everybody. Or don't if you're not into it. But in any case, right? Like, I would like for people to have the best sex that they can have.
I would like to have sex.
I just want people to have the best sex that they want. That's what I want. Anyway. Happy fucking, everybody.
That should be how you end these segments.
Okay.
Happy fucking,
Happy
everybody.
Fucking, everyone.
I think we got a new thing.
Okay.
All right. I guess with that will be the end of our show this week. Special thanks to our musical guests. And hope it wasn't too much of a bummer before we got to the sex segment, because it's been rough. As Esmè said, still looking for musicians, scouting. If you like our show, like what we got, you got some music you want to share, please get in contact with us. Also, I'm still collecting people for the poetry episode coming up in the near future. So if you want to contribute to that, once again, let me know. Contact me via our Facebook page right now. That would be the best way to contact us right now. And, we'll get together on that. If you want to be on the show, as we say always, you're welcome. Contact us. That's what I'm going for here. Like and share. We'd love for you to share our podcast with other people who like listening to us talk. I know we like listening to us talk.
Yes, that is true.
So we'd like to share that with others. So like and share our podcast, please. And thank you for listening. And as always, this has been Keem and Esmè. Yay. And we are out.
But there are these things that matter, and they really fucking matter. There's like 4 things that matter, and they really fucking matter. I mean, objectively, you should care, especially you, if you thought about it for 5 fucking minutes.